Chapter 15. Expanding the Boundaries. Healing the Dead. Since working on Julia's deceased husband, Paul, who I described in Chapter 10, I've worked on quite a few other deceased individuals. I find it fascinating the work can be done on this level. Recently, I had a session with a very sensitive and aware woman whose husband had died 2 or 3 years ago. She had been doing her own work, and her husband had been doing his work too while he was alive. She'd assumed he had been clear when he died and that he had crossed over. I've learned that when I work on someone, I also need to work on that person's immediate family members and anyone they mention who has passed away. In this case, the woman told me she hadn't been able to sense her deceased husband much anymore. It's like he's gone off and moved somewhere else, she says. I asked her if she was sure he'd gone to the light. She didn't know. She wasn't able to feel him. People often assume their relatives or loved ones who have died have crossed over. But when I ask them directly if they're sure, it turns out that most of the time they're not. They want to believe it, of course. They don't want to consider the other option. I couldn't sense this woman's husband either. All I saw was darkness. I couldn't see his light. Then, as soon as we started focusing on him, I got that pinch in the neck, and I started feeling nauseous. Archangel Michael immediately began removing demons, and then the Arcturians removed the reptilians. The Arcturians can do their work on these souls easier and faster than they can on the living, because they don't have to deal with a physical body. The DNA is reconfigured instantly instead of requiring a 3-week process. The imprint is removed right then and there. Once the demons and reptilians were removed, I was able to sense her husband. At that point, there was a little conversation back and forth between the two of them. Then I told him, "Okay, it's time for you to go to the light now." The angels don't always do this in these situations, but in this instance, they helped him go to the light. The energy and appreciation I felt from him was tremendous. I saw his light then. I mean, he just lit up. And I got that backflash of unconditional love I sometimes get when discarnates go to the light. Healers, mediums, or psychics who don't know they need to check for reptilians can be very easily misled into thinking the deceased person has crossed over. Not only can the demons and reptilians block people from going to the light after they die, that veil the reptilians put up can block our perception of what is actually going on. That's why I wasn't picking up on him or feeling him at first. He didn't have the bloodline, but he had died with reptilians and demons and had not been able to cross over. He was stuck in limbo. Without being healed, he would have remained there, unable to come back in another incarnation. Some souls who have the reptilian or demon imprint on them are able to cross over, but they bring that imprint and the entities back with them in their next incarnation. Prior to about 6 months ago, I wasn't doing this type of work as often because I didn't know you could heal the dead. I thought once a person was dead, that was it. He or she was gone, and what we did on earth couldn't affect them. I didn't know we could cross that boundary to heal them. But now I'm doing it more and more frequently. It's part of the evolution of this healing work. Creating large-scale vortexes. Another aspect of the evolution or expansion of the work involves creating large-scale vortexes, sometimes several miles in diameter, which clear out all the entities from a particular area, although right now they don't remove the entities that are possessing the people inside that area. The first time I was involved in creating a large-scale vortex was during my weekend camping trip in the mountains in the summer of 2009, which I described in the introduction. I had just completed the series of channeling classes and had been working on individuals to remove demons, discarnates, and attachments, and send them to the light. Much of that work was still new to me, and as I've said, I was playing catch-up in an effort to understand what was going on. I still am. I had no idea how many more surprises were still in store for me. I hadn't yet encountered the Arcturians and discovered I was connected with them, nor did I know anything about the reptilians. It took the series of sessions with Carl in the fall of that year for all of those pieces to begin coming together. Once I came in contact with the Arcturians and accepted their download, I began to work with them on a regular basis whenever I was doing removals and healings. In the spring of the year after the sessions with Carl, I started doing a lot of large-scale vortex work, especially around the southwest United States. That first vortex took me by surprise, but once I started doing them more often, I knew exactly what was going on. It felt like a natural progression. How it works. One way or another, the Arcturians will manage to get my attention as to where they want a vortex created. They may use a person or a place, but whatever it is, I always understand what they mean. They guide, inspire, or lead me to go to a particular location. I don't actually need to be physically present in that location in order to get the vortex going, but if possible, I prefer to be there. I like to see it and experience it. It's interesting to watch how the birds or animals within the vortexes react. Some of them make all kinds of racket, like the ravens who start cawing incessantly, and the bull in that meadow that wouldn't stop bellowing. The energy feels really charged. If I'm going to go out someplace and do this in person, I start with protection beforehand. Once I get there, I call in the Arcturians and I begin creating the vortex. I've gotten into the habit of twirling my hand upward, which I'm sure isn't necessary, but I like to participate in the process. Twirling my hand is my way of sort of directing the orchestra. Once the vortex gets going, Jesus stands in the middle, above it. He doesn't come down in these types of situations. Then the energy starts coursing through me, and I'll get confirmation as to whatever is there. Pinch on the neck if there are reptilians, nausea if there are demons. I'll bring in warrior and protection angels just for this particular vortex. There are a lot of different kinds of angels, but since this is spiritual warfare, I expressly ask for warrior and protection angels. Then I ask Archangel Michael to start taking the demons up to the light. I can't see them, but I sense them. Usually they're going up right and left. First we clear all of the demons that are floating around waiting to attack someone. Usually because they're attacking me right away. Sometimes other guides will come in. Often Archangel Gabriel comes in, or maybe Mother Mary. Not only in these situations, but in individual work as well. When I'm doing a healing session for someone, often that person's own guides come through to participate in the process. Once Archangel Michael has taken the demons to the light, we keep the vortex going, and I ask the Arcturians to start taking all the reptilians within this vortex up to the light, if they haven't already started. It's the same sequence I use in individual work. But in these large-scale vortexes, we're only removing the reptilians that are outside of people. If there are portals underground, the Arcturians let me know how many, and they send a shaft of light down into each one as far as it needs to go. Then they begin neutralizing the reptilians. The shaft of light also works the same in one of these vortexes as it does for an individual. It pierces the veil to expose the reptilians, and it stuns them so they can't escape. Other reptilians may try to come in for whatever reason, but once they're in the vortex, they won't be able to get out either. It's like birds flying into a window. Thunk. They're temporarily knocked unconscious. In my mind's eye, I see the reptilians as dark little Gumbies floating up inside the vortex. The Arcturians tell me how long it's going to take to clean out the portals. Sometimes it's just a day. Other times it's a few days, or even as long as 2 weeks. It depends on how many portals there are, and how deep into the earth they go, and how many caverns and chambers they have. Some of these vortexes can be as large as 30 to 60 miles in diameter. Recently, I've started conducting 100-mile in diameter vortexes. Once I stop feeling that pinch in the neck, I know the reptilians are no longer harassing me, so I can let them go. Just as the Arcturians do in an individual session, they then remove all the eggs that are within the vortex. A wasp's nest of demons. There may be another wave of demons for Archangel Michael to remove. I've had demons come at me like a swarm of wasps in some situations. I was traveling out of state a couple of years ago, before I had even started doing this large-scale vortex work, and stopped at a historical site. It was at the end of a winding road about a half-mile off the highway and had signs everywhere marking spots where battles had taken place during different wars. The entire area was full of negative energy. Although at the time I didn't know why. I was on vacation and just looking for a souvenir for my brother, and I went inside a building I really didn't feel comfortable entering. I stuck my head into a back room where 8 or 10 people were sitting around a circle, listening to a man who was singing country western songs. Not only were every one of those people possessed, but the entire area was being used as a sort of demonic pickup spot. People came there to drink and listen to summer concerts and were unknowingly opening themselves up to possession. I slowly walked back to the front of the building, stood aside, and called in my guides. Archangel Michael began removing the demons that were roaming around there, as well as the demons inside those 8 or 10 people. Fortunately, when I'm removing demons on this kind of a scale, I don't experience all that nausea and the gagging reflex I have when I'm removing them from an individual. That would be too much, too intense. I wouldn't be able to do the work if I had to go through that. Suddenly, after completing the vortex and the healing work, I felt an overwhelming urge to leave that place, just get out. I didn't know why, but I got into my car and I was heading out the winding dirt road back toward the highway. Another car pulled in front of me. I had an unexplained moment of panic because I thought the car was going to slow me down, and I really felt like I had to get away from that place. But all of a sudden, the car just disappeared. Maybe it pulled over somewhere. I don't know what happened to it. I never saw it again. But as soon as it was gone, I took off. When I got onto the highway, I felt a swarm of demons coming at me just like wasps. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. And as I was driving down the highway, I sensed the battle going on behind me between Archangel Michael and the warrior and protection angels and that swarm of demons. These demons were not from the site, but they had come from the surrounding area to extract revenge. They were furious at having their activity at this site disrupted. I haven't felt or experienced anything that chilling before or since, and I'm very grateful for the protection of the angels. Of course, they were aware I did not go to that place to get a physical gift for my brother, but to be part of a healing gift for the whole area. That's why I say this is spiritual warfare, and you can't take it lightly. You've got to make sure you're well protected and you're ready. I wasn't totally prepared to encounter what I did at that historical site, but that was an unusual situation. Now, I usually know what I'm going to be doing or getting into ahead of time. And if I find myself in a situation like this one, I call on the Arcturians and get a vortex going. I hadn't gone to that particular place in order to create one, or even to do any removals, so what happened caught me off guard. As a result, I had to react quickly. Thank God, my vibrational frequency was high. The Arcturians finished the job. The next thing that happens is the discarnates go. Remember, the vortex opens up to the heavens. Jesus is already standing up there in the middle, and the angels are swirling around the outside of it. It isn't uncommon for me to call in 1 million or more angels for one of these large-scale vortexes. So I say to the discarnates, all right, everybody, just look up. Just look up. When they look up, they can see the light. They can see Jesus and the angels. I can feel them go. It's a whoosh, just like that. Often, discarnates have demons or reptilians attached to them, so we have to make sure all the demons and reptilians are gone beforehand. If any of them are still there, they won't let the discarnates go. That's why we do the removals in this particular sequence. You have to neutralize the reptilians because they can control the demons. And you have to neutralize and remove the demons because they can control the discarnates. Once all the entities have been removed, there's nothing else for me to do. The Arcturians, whose vortex it really is, will stay with it until they're finished clearing out the portals, and then they'll shut them down permanently. I don't know how many Arcturian spaceships are present working any particular vortex. They bring in as many as they need to do the job. Most people who are sensitive to these kind of energies tell me afterward, when they're in the area of the vortex, that it feels lighter, peaceful, more comfortable. The energy isn't as heavy or dense. Vortexes near and far. These vortexes can be created anywhere. The Arcturians have guided me to a lot of different places around the southwest United States to do them. I've traveled to a number of Native American locations and a lot of the historic sites and national monuments around here. At one remote area of Anastasi ruins I had first visited nearly 20 years ago, I was clearly warned by some type of dark energy to get out. I wasn't welcome there. So I left and stayed away from it until about a year and a half ago when a friend wanted to visit the site. It wasn't a pleasant experience. The energy was still very dense and negative. It felt oppressive and suffocating. I've since cleared it of the demons that were there, and when I went back later, they were gone, and the place felt much better. But a lot of people visit places like that, so who knows how many people were infected by those demons over the period of time when they were there. At another similar location, I encountered quite a few discarnates who had been hanging around for maybe hundreds or even thousands of years guarding the place. After we got the vortex going, all but one of them left. He was the final warrior protector for that site, but he did not want to go even when we told him to look up. Finally, the angels told him his time here was done. It was time for him to leave so he could come back and help in another capacity. He understood that and agreed to go. When he left, some angels escorted him up to the light. When I first started doing these vortexes, I took pictures at each of the locations. In one place, I photographed an area inside some cliff dwellings where people had once lived, both before starting the vortex and after the removals. In the pictures taken after the removals, there are small orbs of light that aren't in the first set of pictures. I don't have a ready explanation for that. All I can say is that the energy afterward felt very, very good. A large hospital. Sometimes, as I mentioned, the Arcturians might lead me to create one of these vortexes in the course of my contact with a person, one that I'm working with. In one such instance, I met with a couple in order to do some work on their son. Although I didn't think the husband and wife needed any work, I checked them just to be sure everyone was clean and clear before I started on their son. As soon as I went to check the wife, whoosh, just like that, the Arcturians led me to the large hospital where she worked. That place was loaded. There were 5 portals under the hospital, and the Arcturians worked on it for 5 days before it was completely cleared out. After getting that vortex going through the hospital and down into the portals over the property, I started working on the couple's son, who lives in another state. We cleared both him and his wife, and then when we started on his home, the Arcturians immediately guided me to expand the vortex to 15 miles in diameter to cover the entire small town where the couple lived. When I spoke to the parents after they visited their son, later they had told me he was going through the emotional roller coaster ride people often experience after reptilians have been removed. But they said the whole town felt so much lighter and more energetic. It wasn't as dense and dark as it had felt to them during their previous visits. 2 nuclear facilities. One of the most interesting vortexes I was involved in was at Los Alamos National Laboratory, which was founded during World War II to develop atomic and nuclear weapons. An acquaintance of mine, who is a psychic, took a trip through that area and told me later about some strange experiences she had. It was already on my list to work on, so a couple of weeks after talking to her, I went in and we got a vortex going. Reptilians weren't the only negative energies that needed to be removed, so it wasn't just the Arcturians who came through on that one. The Andromedans were there, as was the whole Galactic Federation, which I bring in whenever things don't feel right to me, or when there's something the Arcturians don't appear to have dominion over. It was a major operation. They kept that vortex going for 2 weeks, which is the longest one I'm aware of yet. I'm a catalyst for getting the vortex started, but once it gets going, I'm out of the picture. The Arcturians finished their work without me. I did go in periodically during those 2 weeks on this one just to take a look and see what was happening. I do that quite often when the Arcturians keep a vortex going for a while. So I scanned every few days. and it looked to me like the original portal wasn't very deep, but the vortex kept going down, 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 through all these different levels of subterranean chambers, clearing them out one at a time. It was just like taking an elevator down to the next group of rooms, then the next group of rooms, and the next group of rooms after that. These tunnels don't just dead end. They lead into and connect with larger underground caverns or bases or with other tunnels. I have no idea how many of those chambers there were, but it seemed to take 1 or 2 days to clear each of one of those out. And also bear in mind, these are not third-dimensional tunnels. They're multi-dimensional tunnels, extra-dimensional tunnels. So it's easy for these other dimensional beings to be in that particular area. I've also worked with the Arcturians to clear Sandia National Laboratories, which is another facility dedicated to nuclear weapons and research. I actually saw reptilians standing guard in one area of the base over some stockpiled nuclear weapons. It was one of the more chilling images I've ever seen. Removing all these entities raises the vibrational frequency of places like Los Alamos or Sandia. But these locations are natural targets for reptilians and demons, since they want the kind of fear and anger and aggression those facilities represent. They latch right onto it. Mount Shasta. In Chapter 6, I described the first time I was on the ship Athena and visiting the planet Arcturus with 2 women who were also connected with the Arcturians. After we returned from our trip to Arcturus, the topic of Mount Shasta came up for some reason. When I told them I felt I had work to do over there, they suggested we check it out remotely. I wasn't aware I could do something like that. I had done a little remote viewing before, but this was the first time I did it intentionally or directly. When I got to Mount Shasta, I looked down over it from above. I saw what looked like a black mass of snakes, a den of reptilians, inside one section of the mountain. It was disgusting. So I just broke it off and I came back. That was all I needed to see to confirm what I had already intuitively knew. Mount Shasta needed to be cleansed of the reptilians. At that time, it obviously wasn't 100% pure. I really wanted to go to Mount Shasta in person to do that work, but hadn't had the opportunity to go there yet, so several months later, I went back remotely and I cleared it of the reptilians. Mexico City. In my travels, I'll sometimes pass through or by an area, like Gettysburg National Cemetery, for example, assuming it needs to be cleared of discarnates. But when I go in to check, I won't sense very many discarnates left. There isn't much of anything remaining. When I ask the guides what's going on, I've been told other people have been sending discarnates to the light from that area for years. On the other hand, some places you might expect need to be cleared, like Los Alamos or Sandia, really do need a clearing. One of the largest vortex I've ever participated in creating was over Mexico City. In fact, that's the vortex depicted on the cover of this book. I've never been to Mexico City, but the Arcturians led me to do the work at a distance from my home, and we created a vortex 30 miles in diameter. Something particularly interesting happened with this one. I was sitting with my eyes closed and sensed the vortex was over the western or northwestern part of the city. I have no idea what the terrain is like over there, but I felt the vortex kind of slide up along one side, as if it were going up some mountains. Afterwards, I checked an online map, and sure enough, there are mountains in that region. There were so many portals under Mexico City that the Arcturians worked that vortex for several days. Imagine how many reptilians, demons, and discarnates left that place during this time. When the discarnates were going up to the light, they appeared to me as a black mass. It was huge. When I did the very first vortex on that camping trip and asked my guides how many had gone to the light, the answer I got was 2,000. When I asked this time, the answer was 2 million. That's 2 million souls cleared and taken to the light all at once. Once a vortex is finished, reptilians, demons, and discarnates are free to return to that area. Not the ones who were removed and went to the light, but any others outside that area. A couple of months after that 30-mile vortex was finished in Mexico City, the Arcturians had me create another one. And this time they expanded it to 60 miles in diameter, which at that time was the largest vortex I'd ever been involved in creating. I'm not entirely sure why they had me go back to expand it. Maybe it's a matter of resources. Maybe the Arcturians can only take so many reptilians at a time. But this kind of thing may need to be done on a regular basis in order to keep an area clear. So I'll go back and do it again at some point if I'm led or inspired to do it. Raising the vibration of the planet. Even if we do have to go back and clear it again, look at all the negativity that left that one location. Removing all those reptilians and demons and discarnates from an area that size improves the vibration of the area tremendously. I wasn't there in Mexico City, and I didn't have anyone on the ground to check in with. But I know it makes the energy lighter and clearer. It has to affect the entire city and all the people in it. But not only does it affect that specific area and those particular people, it also affects the entire planet. However, so far we haven't been able to clear or remove the entities that are inside the people who are in these large-scale vortexes. We create vortexes to clear individuals, and then we create them for these large-scale clearings or removals. But even though it's the same healing process in both situations, with the large vortexes, we haven't been able to get to the entities inside the people in that vortex yet. Although it didn't involve creating a vortex, the situation at the historical site in Texas was an exception in that Archangel Michael and the other guides removed demons from inside several individuals at the same time. And while I was finishing this book, I was reminded of another situation that occurred around the same period of time that I had forgotten about. On 2 occasions during Christmas services at a local mega church, I also experienced Michael removing entities from inside a number of people at the same time. Because it was Christmas, the church was packed both with adults and with children who were attending Sunday school classes. I don't know the exact number of children who were present at each of the services I attended, but they numbered in the hundreds, maybe as many as 1,500. I was led to ask my guides to clear all of the children, and in one instance, I received a message that something like 300 demons were released from those children. Now, children are more resilient than a lot of older adults, and they haven't had entities inside them for decades, so maybe they're easier to clear in a group. And these were demons, not reptilians, that were removed, both from the children and from those people in that historical site. So I'm not sure what the explanation is. Maybe the ability is already present, and I need to develop it and exercise it. I hadn't gone to that church with the intention of clearing anyone, just as I hadn't had that intention when I was on vacation at that historical place in Texas. So of course, I didn't have my tape recorder in either situation, and I don't have any documentation of them like I have of all the one-on-one or group sessions. But you can't always document every instance of clearing someone. I do it so often now, frequently on the spur of the moment when I'm out and about, that it's become almost commonplace. I think we somehow have to get to the point where we can routinely remove all the entities inside people, including reptilians, during the course of these large-scale vortexes. I envision it happening. I know the Arcturians can do it. The limitation right now is probably me. It would be wonderful to line up 1,000 people, or even 10,000, in an auditorium and do a mass removal. After an hour session, we could tell them, "All right, everyone here, whatever you had is gone." Is that possible? I think it is. Even though I'm not there yet, intuitively, I believe it's going to happen. I think that's the natural progression. That's all where all this work is leading. Right now, we can heal millions of discarnates, deceased souls all at once, why can't we also be able to heal millions of living souls all at once?